Well, happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome in to another edition of GC Live Talking Tuesday Nights. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike. You appreciate you guys tuning in as always, as we don't have a game to talk about this week, but there's still plenty to talk about as South Carolina heads into the off week with a record of 2-3, coming off a very disappointing loss this past weekend against Tennessee. We will get into that. We will get into where this program is as they head into this idle week. We'll also be joined by Gamecock 2024 quarterback commit Dante Reno. He'll be joining us shortly to share his thoughts on just what he's been up to, how the season's been going for him, some recruiting stuff that maybe he can share with us, as well as just his overall thoughts about USC. So I think it's always good to have a player talk about those things because I think, it doesn't make a weekend like we just saw this past weekend go away completely. But I think some people get worried about recruits sometimes. So it's always neat to hear from a prospect when it comes to those things. We've heard from him in the past, both wins and losses from Dante. So having said all that, Joe, I'm going to make the floor yours to begin. Where is just your thoughts on where this program is as we head into this idle week? Not talking about the state of the program, but the state of the 2023 team.
Yeah, Mike, it is kind of a loaded question, but it is the bye week, and there were no press conferences today, so it is a good time to just kind of evaluate where South Carolina is compared to everywhere else in the country. And for me, I think they're in a pretty good spot. If you consider just how Shane has been recruiting, he's been on fire. He's been getting some of the right guys. You're seeing that really early on. I was thinking we would see some of the quality of these recruits, or we would see, how good really are some of these recruits that you're bringing in. That was going to be a question, for a little bit into this year, but a little bit more into next year. But now that you have Tree and Trovon Baugh both playing a lot, you're starting to see the quality of these players that Shane is recruiting, and the way that those two freshmen have performed. It should excite you, number one. And number two, just with this season in general, this team got beat pretty badly up in Knoxville. It wasn't the best of game. You needed to perform on all fronts, and you knew how well their defense was going to play. And I talked about it a lot in the walkthrough. This defense is that Tennessee defense is no joke, right? We talk about how vulnerable they are with the offense, and sure, you can't win a lot of games if you can't score the points. But when your defense plays as lights out as they did against South Carolina, it gives you a really, really good chance to win. And I don't pin this on the offensive line as much as I do. It's more of the quality of Tennessee's defense. And so going into this bye week, Mike, for me at least, what you want to see from this team is just find ways to put it all together, right? We've seen different position groups in different phases play really, really, really well and play good enough to win a game, but they've been lacking in other areas, and which ultimately costs them some of these games, right? We go to Georgia, you get shut out in the second half, and different units have to play better, and same goes with the defense, right? In Mississippi State, we know the secondary didn't play well, and then sure enough, they show up against Tennessee, but then you couldn't stop the run. So this bye week is going to be good for this team because they get to go home, take a little break from football, and ultimately just kind of relax a little bit and figure out a way that you can have everybody on the same page and playing up to the standard that you can. Because if everyone's on the same page, this team is up there. They were beating Georgia 14-3 at half, and they can hang with really anybody in the SEC, which is the best conference in football. So saying that, it shows, right? If you can put it all together, you can beat anybody in the country. And so that should give you some hope, some excitement if you're a South Carolina fan, because you have the talent to do it. It takes a little bit more to get on the same page and everyone be cohesive, right? Obviously the really, really good teams are going to be able to have more mistakes and stuff like that. But South Carolina, they're in a great spot. Quarterback hasn't been an issue, and that is certainly a luxury that you can have, especially in the SEC. Spencer's been so good up until this point. And so when you have the quarterback, it's really everything else around him that needs to click. And for South Carolina, when you're as young as you are and not as deep in some spots, it's really, really hard to have every phase of the game on the same page. So going into the bye week, Mike, that's what you got to fix up. And that's kind of my state of the team, right? You can hang with any team in the country, but you have to do more work to get everyone on the same page, whether that be coaching, whether that be just interior, like the guys coaching each other up, Morale of the units in particular, I'm not sure what exactly. I think all of it, for that matter. But you got to figure out a way to get everyone on the same page and execute, because that's what you need to do to win some of these games. And coming up, they have a lot of tough ones: Florida, Mizzou, Kentucky. I mean, and those teams, their harder schedule is ahead of them, and before they get to South Carolina. So we'll really see what kind of teams that they are before they get to play the Gamecocks. But nonetheless, they are still very good and quality SEC opponents that are going to be dogfights. So you got to find a way to get everyone on the same.
I'm going to nitpick on something you said. They're not in a great spot. They're not in a great spot. They're not in a great spot for the last point you brought up. They have a difficult schedule coming up. You look at the schedule coming up. Florida after the bye week. Then you got to go to Missouri, who's ranked number 21. Then you got to go to Texas A&M. You got Jacksonville State, Vandy, Kentucky, and Clemson after that. Even that Jacksonville State game, even though it's against an FCS opponent, that's one of the better ones. And I'm not saying South Carolina shouldn't win that game. They should win that game. But my whole point is you look at what is coming up. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you got obviously Clemson to close out the year. Other than Vandy, and Vandy is shown at times that they're not the doormat that they used to be. That's not to say that they're not, that they're a great team by any means. What I'm trying to get at, though, is when you combine that, when you look at what is coming up for South Carolina on the back half of the schedule, combined with the issues that are not going to go anywhere. The first issue is the lack of depth. This extra week, yes, it is going to help, hopefully, in terms of being able to get some of these guys more experience. But at the same time, too, as we've seen, and when they're already banged up in certain areas to the point where a bye week's not going to help you. So I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here, but my whole point is this. This bye week could not have come at a better time for USC, okay? But it only gets tougher from here on out, and that's the scary part. That's the scary part, that if they're not able to figure out some of these things, right? And it's the lack of consistency is what really stands out to me, Joe, because you bring up some things that I think when we look at it from a realistic standpoint, it's just the reality. Now, having said all that, the reality being it's a young team. They're thin in certain areas. Injuries have not helped them throughout the first couple of weeks of the season. But the frustrating part to me about everything is, well, you're not going to be able to correct everything in the course of a season, especially through the first 5 weeks, especially when you have as many flaws as we saw week 1 against North Carolina. They have done some good things at times, right? We talk about the offensive line play, but it hasn't been consistent enough. Against Tennessee, as you mentioned, probably one of the better defenses they're going to see, all right? Especially that front. But what Tennessee did in that game, if you go back and watch, they didn't respect your rushing attack the way that Mississippi State had to. So I point that out because it can't just be the Spencer Rattler show. As good as he is, I don't care if it's Joe Montana, Tom Brady, but it doesn't matter who your quarterback is. He's going to get freaking killed, number one. But number two, you're not going to be able to give him time to do the things that he's been doing through the first couple weeks of the season. So that's what scares me, is that if they're not able to give their quarterback time, okay, if they're not able to figure out, and that extra week will hopefully help out a little bit, but if they're not able to do that on top of being able to get healthy at certain positions, this could go really, really south quickly. And I'm not trying to be negative Nancy, but it's just the reality of it. Having said all that, okay, wanted to bring up the negative stuff first, Joe. I don't want people to just think I'm out here just going to say, okay, everything's all sunshine and rainbows, everything's good. No, okay? What I'm trying to get at is, though, as they head into this bye week, if you're able to address some of these areas, if you're able to get healthy in some of these areas, and you're able to come out and you're able to get a win against Florida in 3-3, yes, you still have a difficult task coming up with the schedule. 2 of your furthest opponents when it comes to SEC play, you got to play them in back-to-back weeks at their universities. That's not going to be easy. That is why this bye week, more than anything, being able to just friggin' figure out what it's going to take to be able to correct some of these inconsistencies. That's what it comes down to, because they've shown that they can do good things. They've shown it against Power 5 teams. They showed it in the first half against Georgia. Yeah. This isn't a lost cause team. And I know we live in a world where it feels like, okay, if things aren't going well, it has to be either this way or it has to be that way. No. Okay? This South Carolina team, they have their flaws, just like every team in the freaking country. And a lot of the flaws that we've seen leading up to this point, they should not surprise you. They should not. We've talked about how young they are, the lack of depth. We've talked about the struggles that they were probably going to have at the offensive line. But the frustrating part to me, Joe, is the fact that they've made progress in some areas to a point where they at least can give Rattler time. They can at least be competitive on the field, but it's not consistent enough. So consistency, and I know that's a really vague phrase that I can use, right? But that's the big thing, is just being more consistent. If you can show it one week, can you do it again the next? Never mind the fact that they lost against Tennessee. The spread was like 11.5. And I bring that up just to show you because some people thought that was high. South Carolina, until right before the half, that pick six, which I still don't understand that play call, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
After that, the game wasn't competitive. It wasn't competitive after that. And that's the frustrating part because, again, lack of consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it was kind of funny because I gave the brighter side of this lack of consistency thing, and then you were able to.
I know. I got it. We play good cop, bad cop.
And
we got to, look, Joe.
You make a great point. Because
we have to, but I think that's the reality of it is, and people have been watching our show going back to even last year, right? I could easily come out, and I agree with a lot of the things that you did say. I don't think things are as bad, kind of like what the old saying is with tape, right? When you go back and watch the game film, it's not as bad as it probably was, and it's not as good as it probably was. It's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And although that loss felt really bad, and it should feel really bad, you get your teeth kicked in a lot of different areas. But the thing about it is, and this is the part that I know fans roll their eyes at, a lot of it is correctable, right? A lot of it is correctable, but some of it too just comes down to just freaking having to execute. It's not as simple. I know the easy thing to do in college sports, and I'm so sick and tired of it because it's not going to do you any good week 5, week 6 of the season, right? Oh, fire this guy, fire that guy. It's not as loud this year, maybe, from a defensive standpoint because it comes with the territory. And I'm not telling you things haven't been, they couldn't be better on the defensive side of the ball. They're not going to do that right now, okay? So instead of just yelling at a cloud, instead of just, reading what some schmuck says on Twitter and just rolling with that, okay? Instead of that, go into this freaking bye week and figure things out. Because if they don't get better in certain areas, you want to pound your chest, have at it with that then, okay? The bye week could not have come at a better time for South Carolina. Could not have come at a better time. We look back to last season, and it's not the exact same, but I think back, Joe, right? When you look back to last season for this Gamecock team, they started the year off 1-2. Then you had Charlotte, then you had South Carolina State. Their bye week was a little bit different last year because they were able to gain some momentum, and they went into Texas A&M, or excuse me, they hosted Texas A&M after going into Kentucky and beating them with a record of 4-2. But the changing point to me was the fact that they played Charlotte and South Carolina State, and they were able to gain some confidence.
Yeah.
This bye week, the health, being able to correct some things that during the week, because you have the installation, you're trying to figure things out. Okay, how can we address our own concerns? How can we address our own areas while we're also trying to game plan against a Tennessee pass rush or a Tennessee defense that, they're not going to worry about our rushing attack. They're just going to be sending guys, 4 or 5, and they're going to get there. They got there sometimes with 4. So this week, it allows you to take a step back. And I'm not saying that after the bye week, this is going to look like, a totally different team. But I also wouldn't be shocked to see them come out and play against a Florida team who obviously has been very shaky this season, but a Florida team that has the ability to go out there and beat you by 2 scores, but you also have the chance to go out there and you could probably beat them by 2 scores if you're playing your type of football. So that's why this bye week, to me, there's going to be a lot of questions. There's still a lot of questions, but there's going to be questions still to be answered after the bye week. But I think we're going to learn a lot about this team. We've learned a lot already, but if they can't make these corrections after this bye week, again, it could get ugly real quick just because of the competition that they have lined up over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, plain and simple. And I don't want to say that, we don't know what team is going to show up because we've seen it before, right? They've executed in all phases. Every position group has executed. And I think, when you show that, right? You know the potential of what you have. It is very hard to predict which side is going to show up, right? And that's why Mike and I are there's two sides of the coin, because yes, if every team or if every position group and every facet of the game shows up, you're one of the best teams in the SEC. And I think similar to Florida, I said this in the walkthrough too. Florida's a very fluky team, right? They went out and beat Tennessee in the swamp, and I don't know if that's because of the curse of the swamp and Tennessee hasn't won since '06, whatever. I don't believe in all that, but go ahead. It's SEC lore, go crazy. But I think, and we're going to get to the comments. There's a bunch of questions here, and we'll roll through those after this. But I mean, that's the problem with this team, is you just don't know which group is going to show up what week. And it's so hard to predict whether or not, which group is, which isn't, and then which one is going to win you the game. Because at Tennessee, you needed your offensive line to show up in a big way and stop the defensive line, because this defensive line, I mean, you're right, Mike, sacking people with 4, 3, 5 sometimes. Like it's really, really, really hard to go up against a defensive line like that caliber when your offensive line doesn't have, their best game. And granted, there were bright spots for this offensive line, but and we saw it. I mean, the first half against Georgia, they looked really good. And so it's just really, really tough to predict what all is going to go down when you were so, up and down and inconsistent in all these different spots. And like I said, the one bright shining spot that hasn't been questioned yet in terms of consistency is the quarterback position. We all know that. But getting into some of the comments, Mike, did you have something before we did?
Yeah, I wanted to bring one thing up.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the sacks allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Old Dominion, they're ranked last in the country. They've given up 27. Colorado, 129th in the country. They've allowed 26. And tied for third worst in the country, you got South Florida and South Carolina. So I bring that up because outside of South Carolina, when you talk about SEC teams, and I think it's going to surprise some, unless you've really been paying attention to what's been going on over there, Alabama's not too far off from there. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that they've been playing musical chairs at quarterback this season. But I bring that up because as I just look around, Arkansas is in there kind of above it.
Mm-hmm.
With SEC play, with South Carolina and a lot of these other teams from the conference, now you're getting into SEC play. For a lot of these other teams, they probably haven't. And again, this is kind of just more speaking in general terms without going down the list of schools and looking at who they've played. We know like the Georgias of the world, they really haven't played anyone outside of conference play that's that competitive, right? USC, yes, they've had a tough out-of-conference schedule. And I know some might roll their eyes at the Furman game. But, you played North Carolina week 1. So, yes, you've been going up against good competition. The competition's only going to get better in SEC play. So, when you look at that number, is it indicative of who this team is? You know what I mean? Like, I know Shane Beamer said the other day, and I tend to agree with him. It's one of those phrases that people don't like to hear. And I don't know if it's one that, he should have kept more to himself. But again, I don't disagree with him. It's more so by him saying that he's kind of letting his team know, right? That when he says that, hey, look, my guys will hear that from the media. And I'm trying to remember exactly how he worded it, so I'm going to paraphrase. But I think we're better. We're better than our record indicates. We're 2-3. I think we're better than our record indicates. And I think for South Carolina, the issue is, as we've talked about, that lack of consistency has really hurt them from being able to have that record a little bit better, right? We could sit here, we could, play if they did this or they did that game, they could be this record. But bottom line is you are what your record says you are. That's the bottom line. And for South Carolina, you're a 2-3 football team heading into the bye week. What we got here? We got a question here.
Yep, we've got a couple questions, and we can just stream down them real quick.
This one was actually paid for, so
yeah, we'll start with RL.
I'm gonna put it up. Give up AC and heating or internet for the rest of your life living in South Carolina. Goodness. I need a nice change up before we head into some real good questions.
Yeah. I'm going to go AC and heating. I can survive with it. Like I don't know, being a Gen Zer, I don't know if I can survive without internet. But maybe that's my age showing off pretty much. And like being
See,
up
I could do without the heating in the South. That's
yeah,
not an issue. Just throw
yeah,
a friggin' sweatshirt on, you're good.
yeah, couple
I mean,
exactly.
this isn't winters down here.
The
It's not
AC.
winter. It's fine. But the AC, that's ooh.
Yeah.
I'm not just gonna be sitting out underneath a big old friggin' tree, like whittling a friggin' like eating an apple and whittling a stick all day, trying to stay cool in the shade. That's not happening.
Tough question, RL. Tough question indeed. RL also has another one. If you could clarify this one too, two must games this Saturday. I'm
Must watch,
assuming,
he said. Two
yeah,
must watch games this Saturday.
must watch. Yeah,
Usually, let's see. Let's get into that because you did pay for a question. We will answer that, and then we'll get into the rest. I mean, I think the first one is going to easily be Oklahoma and Texas. I think that goes without saying, right?
yeah.
I mean, that is a massive game, and that's two teams that's going to be part of your conference next year. So I think that one really stands out to me. I think looking at some of the other matchups, it all depends on, I mean, I think Kentucky and Georgia is another one because I think we can find out really how good Kentucky is. But another one I'm going to sneak in there, I'm going to give you a bonus one, is LSU and Missouri. And the reason why I say that is LSU is coming off a disappointing loss. If Missouri is able to win this game, they improve to 6-0. They improved to 6-0, and you have Missouri in a couple weeks. So I don't want to sit here and say that I do think that Missouri's been able to pull out some close wins towards the end. And even though I think LSU is better, sitting and using a phrase that Beamer just did, better than what their record indicates, bottom line is you are what your record says you are. You're 3-2. So that's a game that's going to tell us a lot, but that Kentucky game too. And that's why, again, I want to throw Oklahoma, Texas in there. I can't put a prediction on it quite yet.
Yeah, I got two of them. So I would agree. Oklahoma, Texas, LSU, Missouri is one of my true picks. Like I think we're gonna see what kind of team Missouri is because they've been really, really fluky, but they also have a really good quarterback in Brady Cook. He's sneakily having one of the better years in the SEC for a quarterback. So I've got my eye on that one just to kind of see if Missouri can pull that one out. That should concern you a little bit for South Carolina's standpoint. A game's at noon. And then let's see. Kentucky and Georgia. That's another one. You get to see what Kentucky's like. And then the bonus pick is Notre Dame and Louisville. Notre Dame almost lost at Duke this week. And they found a way to win that one. Louisville is a sneaky good team. So for all of you guys in the South that enjoy seeing Notre Dame lose, there's your next chance. And then, of course, Notre Dame goes home to play Southern Cal. But yeah, no. So I got my eyes on the two South Carolina opponents really, and then also Bama and Texas A&M will be an interesting one. I believe that game is at Texas A&M, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so it's at Texas A&M. You'll see the quality of Texas A&M's backup, how he does, and then also how Bama responds to the tough environment of Kyle Field. That's going to play a very big factor in South Carolina's game because they're out on the road at Texas A&M. And so you'll see what kind of team this A&M team, what Jimbo has in terms of A&M this year. So
let's go into some. I'm going to cut you off, Joe, because we got Reno coming up in just a minute.
Yeah.
I want to get to some of these questions. All right, Tommy Lucas, just let's bang this out real quick. What, in your opinion, would make this season a success? And do you think we are progressing or regressing? I think the thing is, to me, if we want to measure it by wins and losses, because it's hard not to in this sport, right? I think even heading into the season, getting to 7 wins would show progress. I know to some people they would think that's kind of being, you're staying stale because you're right in the middle with it. I disagree with that. Year 3 is a very difficult year. If you go back in a lot of the coaching changes that have occurred over the last, I'd say, decade or so, and there's always going to be outliers, but year 3 is usually the turning point, right? Some teams, they struggle. Some teams are able to take off, but even like Dabo Swinney, go look at what they were able to do the first couple of years in that struggle. So I bring that up just because I think being able to get to that 7-win mark it shows like, okay, we're not taking a step back. That's the biggest thing. You don't want to take a step back this year by any means. Having 7 wins in the regular season would be massive. And I know, again, some people are going to be wise guys and say, well, they had 8 wins in the regular season last year. Go look at how many times South Carolina has had 8 wins in their program's history. Okay? You have to sometimes try to stay consistent before you can take that extra step forward in a year or two, especially when you have so much young talent. So that's what I would say to that. Moving along, Josh says, Mike, do you feel like Loggins uses the middle of the field enough? Seems like he likes to go outside the hash marks more. I really like Harbor. Could be one to exploit the middle and take advantage of his size and speed. I think we're seeing a lot more. Look, we see. I think what it is because South Carolina, especially to start the year, and even though Mario Anderson was able to get things going the other night, USC really hasn't been able to run the football consistently, right? We've all known that. Even the other night, though, you take away that 75-yard rush, South Carolina only ran the football for what? I don't have the number in front of me, but let me see if I can pull that up. The point being is they weren't able to run the football well the other night. Yep. That's a little misleading. So I'm looking at it right now. South Carolina rushed for 132 yards. Okay. Now, of course, you throw in sack yardage, taking that away and all that kind of stuff, right? But I bring that up just because it goes to show you why Tennessee didn't respect you running the football, why they didn't bring anyone down the block. So I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they haven't been able to run the football well enough, where they're trying to go to the outside to use the speed, number one, but number two, also trying to stretch the defense out to help the rushing attack. Now, we can sit here and say, well, it works sometimes. It hasn't been working here a lot. I think everything that we've talked about this season is that Dal's working with what he has in his kitchen, right? We've made this analogy before. You want to cook a steak or you want to bake a cake, but you only have a friggin', can of tuna fish and some Fruity Pebbles. You're not going to be able to do that. You got to work with what you got. And I don't know what type of creation you'd really be able to make with Fruity Pebbles and tuna fish. But I think that has a reason why it's playing out that way. I do feel like he's using the middle of the field. But I think one of the reasons why maybe it's not happening as much as people would like, and the reason why I say using the field is because with Marcus Satterfield, it felt like the middle of the field was kind of like, if you remember as a kid, don't go on the lava, that lava game, right? The ground's the lava. That's what it felt like. Satterfield never wanted to use the middle of the field. We're seeing a lot of crossing routes. We saw that with Xavier Leggett 2 weeks ago against Mississippi State and how they were able to use his speed to exploit that for a touchdown. Last week against Tennessee, they did it at times, but I really think the main reason why they did so many passes to the side is because they were trying to slow down that Tennessee pass rush because they knew they couldn't run the football. Tennessee wasn't bringing an extra defender down to the box because they didn't respect your rushing attack. So what can you do to be able to soften that middle up a little bit, especially when your pass blocking wasn't that great? Well, you go to the outside. You try to spread them out a little bit. You try to slow down that pass rush. Did it work? No, but that's one of the reasons why I think it played out that way. Josh also says, what's the deal with Lewis? And to go back to your other point too, yes, I'd love to see Harbor in those crossing routes. And hopefully that extra week can help Harbor out too, because we've mentioned this before. I know some people are sick and tired of hearing it. A true freshman who's making the adjustment from tight end / DN to wide receiver, missed some time towards the end of preseason camp. He's making progress, but he was behind the 8 ball a little bit because of those two things. And when you combine those two things on top of the fact that you're a true freshman and you're trying to figure out what college is all about, it's not necessarily the recipe to speed up the process quickly in comparison to if you're a guy that's already played wide receiver, or you're a guy that didn't get banged up during camp. So I think he's gonna make a difference because you're talking about when we talk about the number of games that you play in for your eligibility, because he's been playing on special teams, South Carolina, they're going to have to use him. They're going to have to play him, or you just burnt a year for a guy that's mainly played on special teams. So what that tells me is they have confidence in him. And I know some people are probably frustrated when Shane Beamer keeps saying each week, we'll see more of this guy. We got to play this guy more. We got to play this guy more. But specifically talking about Harbor, the reason why it should encourage you as a fan is because, again, when you talk about the number of games he was in special teams, he played a little receiver in the North Carolina game too. But because of hitting that mark, you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. And I highly, highly doubt USC went into this season, or even right now heading into the bye week, telling themselves, man, this kid's just going to be a special teams guy this season. No. It's probably just the fact that, again, making the adjustment to wide receiver, missed some time during preseason camp towards the end, and he's just behind a little bit in comparison to where they'd want him to be. But I think this extra week is going to help him out a lot.
Yeah.
What's
I
the
talked
deal?
about it on the walkthrough, Harbor on the walkthrough, so go listen to that.
What's the deal with Lewis? Seems like every time he makes a reception, we make a good play, and he can make some people miss. Doty can't seem to do that as good. I think the big thing is, or at least this is what I take away from it all so far, Joe, is the fact that, as Dante just texted me, I think Doty just understands the playbook probably a little bit better, and they just comfortable with that.
Absolutely.
But again, that doesn't mean Eddie Lewis isn't capable of doing everything that you just said, because he certainly is. And I hope too with this bye week, and maybe it's just me being very optimistic, that we're going to see some of these guys out there more. Yeah. And it's not from a health standpoint, but guys that are coming on, because at some point, right? At some point, the whole, they're not there yet. Well, and we could say that for the first couple weeks of the season. But once we get into the back half of the schedule and we're saying the same things, at some point, you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why is that the case? If it happens to one player or two players, that's life. That's football. That's sports. But if it's happening for multiple players, that's different. I don't think it's specifically talking about the offense. I don't think this has anything to do with the playbook and the way that it's designed. Okay. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm sure there's some people that have PTSD from the last two seasons. We heard so much about how this offense, in comparison to last year's one, it's been streamlined, right? They've brought it down. They've condensed it. I don't think it's too complicated.
No,
I think it's the trust factor of it all.
That's exactly it, right? They're naturally going to trust Doty a little bit more because he's been here longer. I think Eddie Lewis, yes, he's probably more of an athletic and more prototypical wide receiver, but naturally, I mean, Mike, you played college football. You know how far trust goes. I mean, there could be a freshman or like an All-American on the bench, but a guy that you've had for 4 years, it's going to be hard, and that's always in the equation. So I think that's all it boils down to. They just trust Doty more. And I agree. I think Lewis is a very dynamic receiver, needs to see the field more, and I think he will after the bye week. Very, very, very talented kid. And, I mean, also you'll see him on special teams too. Really, really good.
We'll try to keep going through these quick. I'll go try a little quicker. I mean, I went to a completely different direction. Patty says, why can't they? What can they do to buy Spencer Rattler some time to make good decisions? I think it starts with just being able to establish the run, right? Yeah. Changing it up so it's not just pass. Because as we saw the other night, yes, the statistics say that, okay, South Carolina, they ran the ball for over 100 yards, and when under Beamer, they only lost one game heading into that game this past weekend when they rushed the ball for 100 yards. It's a misleading stat from the other night. You need to get the rushing attack going. I think that will help Spencer out. And the other thing, too, is be able to get healthy. Get healthy at some of these positions at wide receiver to be able to get your playmakers out there. And younger guys like Nick Harbor and some of the other players that are coming along this bye week will hopefully help them continue to get more comfortable with the system and everything else when it comes to college football, that they'll be good to go and they can start helping out number 7. Guy that knows a thing or two about playing quarterback. Gamecock 2024 commit, Dante Reno. Dante, how you doing?
I'm great. We just got out of practice about 7, so it was a good day today. But I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We're doing good. Let people know, how many weeks into the season are you? Because I know up north, when it comes to prep schools, you guys start a little bit later, kind of like your dad with the Ivy League with Yale. You guys start pretty late in comparison to like a state down here, like South Carolina, where their first game is, third week? Something like that.
Yeah, super early. Yeah, so we're on week 4 right now. We had a bye week last week, so it's our 4th week of the actual season. So we played 2 games so far, and then we play Deerfield Academy on Friday night. So it's gonna be fun.
Good stuff. Well, as we're talking here, we're talking a lot about the offense, and as you know, when it comes to SEC football, that's the reason why you want to sign up for it. There's highs, there's lows, and this fan base is very passionate. Having said all that, Dante, I know you talked to a lot of the 2024 guys. I'm sure you talked to some guys on the team. I'm not going to ask you to throw any names out there, but when it comes to just a loss like this, right? You're not obviously in the locker room, but as we saw against Mississippi State, when things go well, the highs are high, but when things go low, they're low. What is the excitement level though about just the future and the direction of this program still, despite the fact of what we've seen through 5 weeks in terms of being 2-3 and coming off a tough loss in Knoxville?
Yeah, I think it's all the credit due to Spencer and Coach Loggins what they're doing. I'm sure as all the fans know and as everybody has seen, Spencer has never been this comfortable. He's playing really well and he's like a top 10 quarterback in college football right now. And like you just said, they're 2-3, but they played North Carolina, who's a top 25 team. They lost to Georgia, who's obviously the best team in the country. And then they played Tennessee last week, who's obviously a top 5-10 team in the country as well. So nothing is easy on their schedule. But Spencer's playing really well, and the offense is smooth. The way Spencer's been playing, well, obviously, is his first year in the system. So just to see how quarterback friendly it really is, really excites me and all the commits as well. What we've been talking about in our group chat and how well the young guys are playing as well, like Tree, Marquis, and those guys. True. So it's been awesome to see.
Yeah, Dante, I got a question for you. Just so last time we talked to you, you hadn't really seen this Dowell Loggins offense, or at least in gameplay. I guess now that you have seen it, what excites you about it, and what makes you even more excited to, I guess, come play for him?
Yeah, I think just how quarterback friendly it is. How many reads Spencer can make fast. He's like I talked to Coach Loggins a couple weeks ago. I mean, Spencer's running the whole offense with full command. I mean, he's making changes at the lines. He's making what the reads he wants to go with. So he's really playing comfortable, and I think it shows with his stats, his completion percentage, and all that stuff being up from last year. Then obviously turning the ball over. I think they're turning over a lot less than they did in the past year, and I think it starts with the quarterback and Spencer. So he just looks really comfortable out there, and I think it starts with Coach Loggins. And it goes all the way down. So it's awesome so far.
Yeah.
You mentioned Big Tree and seeing Ba out there as well. And we know that there's some more pieces to that 2023 recruiting class, and there's some more coming in for 2024 where there could be potentially 2 5-stars on the offensive line. We'll see what happens, though, in terms of the star rankings. I say all that, Dante, because, you're not dumb. You've been paying attention to this. Naturally, when things don't go well up front, and even though God bless Spencer Rattler for being able to do what he's been able to do, and the offensive line trying to do what they can too, because it's not easy when you have to try to figure out a group of 5 guys on the fly with the injury they had back in the spring, and then obviously losing a right tackle in the first game. They've been able to make things happen, though, in terms of being able to adjust on the fly. But I say all that because with that, the young guys are getting in there. Where is your excitement level as a quarterback just watching those 2 guys in particular and what they could potentially do moving forward?
Yeah, obviously it's awesome to see those guys going out there and competing. Like you said, Tree, I mean, he got there in the summer, and he didn't really have much time before the season to go out there, and obviously he wasn't there in the spring. So just seeing him go out there, and True going out there too, and Marquis and all those other guys. I think Tyshawn Russell, he caught a ball the other game against Tennessee too. So just seeing all those guys, because I was helping recruiting those guys with Pup and all the other commits. So building relationships with them and seeing them going out there and doing their thing. It's been really great for me to see. And then obviously our 24 class, we're all really close with the class above us and a couple classes above them. So it's been really cool to see, just especially the relationships that you have with them as a kid and as a commit. So it's been awesome.
Yeah, Dante, I'll follow this up. I mean, obviously you're working through your season and you're getting that much closer to finally getting to South Carolina. What are some things that I guess you're working on in your senior year and some things that you're trying to, hammer out before you get to South Carolina? And also, too, are they, giving stuff back to you? Like, are you looking at film with some of these coaches here, and how does that work?
Yeah, so the film part, I think it's illegal if I'm watching any tape with them right now and stuff like that. But no, I mean, just watching the games when I can, when I'm not at my dad's games. I mean, they've been playing every Friday. I think they play every Saturday night so far. And Coach Beamer came out with it in a press conference. He's like, "Can we get an afternoon game?" But it's been good for me because I can watch them at night. So I watch my dad play. So it's been good. Other than that, I mean, I've just been focused on my season. We're off to a good start right now. We're 2-0, and we've thrown for 800 yards in 2 games. So I got a bunch of guys to throw to. So just kind of focusing, being where my feet are right now, but also paying attention to what they're doing and all that stuff as well.
I'm sure heading into this year, you had goals, and I'm not even talking about statistical goals. I'm talking about things that you wanted to be able to do in terms of sharpening your skills before you get ready for college football. Because as many know, when following you in your career, and obviously the recruiting process, they know that you'll be enrolling into South Carolina come January, and it's going to be. I mean, I think. Look, I'm not trying to push this season aside because they obviously enjoy seeing Rattler out there, but they also know it's going to be a fun competitive quarterback room with obviously Lenoris there, Tanner Bailey's there, Luke Doty still there as well. People forget about that. Doty will be back. Well, yeah. At least he has another year if he wants. Yeah. I bring that up though, Dante, because what are some of the things that heading into the season you wanted to be able to improve on your game, and where do you feel like you have been able to do some of that?
Yeah, I think a big thing for me was just showing a lot of people I'm not just a recruiter. Like, I'm not just out there to go recruit people to come play with me at South Carolina, that I'm actually a football player. And I think I've done that through the first 2 games. So obviously proving all those people. But no, at the end of the day, like you said, it's going to be a fun quarterback room. I'm obviously really close with all those guys down there. Luke, obviously, I've stayed with him a bunch of times. Norris, he's a great kid. Tanner, like you said, he's obviously a really good player. So having all those guys in the quarterback room is going to be really fun. I can't wait to go down there and compete with them. But no, like I said in the beginning, just showing people that I can actually play football a little bit, not just recruit on Twitter.
We've talked about that a little bit, and I know it means, I'm sure you appreciate it when fans are like, Dante. I think actually someone brought it up in Big Red. I'm picking on you a little bit, Dante, the closer, Reno. I'm sure you appreciate it because at the same time too, you want to be able to help build a program when it comes to helping not just yourself, but obviously the school that you're going to. Yeah. Pop Howard, he was a phenomenal closer too. He was a phenomenal recruiter. And then obviously once you get here, you want to be, showing people like, hey, look, guys, I'm not just a, recruiter. I'm here to be able to play some ball too. Yeah. So, hearing you say that, I think has been good. And, based on what you've been able to do so far this season, I think it's certainly shown. As the season continues to progress for you, Dante, what else do you want to be able to do outside of obviously winning another state championship, just in terms of being able to help get your game to that next level?
Yeah, I think obviously just starting with being able to read coverages, stuff like that, taking it week to week. And our league, we're really good. We have a lot of good people that we play against. Every team, that kids aren't playing both ways. So you play against a team that have 22 starters, 26 kids, they rotate. So it's a bunch of good kids. They're all older kids too, 18, 19 years old that we're playing against. So just being able to go through my reads, get more comfortable with that. And then I got some dudes outside. I got like a 6'5" receiver, power 5 kid. My tight ends, top 3 in the country, going to Penn State. I got a USC commit playing receiver. So it's been really fun for me just being able to get those guys the ball. But obviously just having my fun in my last season. Obviously it's my last year and decided to come back and play in my senior year. So it's been awesome, and I wouldn't have changed anything. So it's been great.
Dante, correct me if I'm wrong, because you went to a new school. I'm assuming, all right, you have a new playbook as well. But how has that adjustment been? And the reason I bring that up is because even though it can be a disadvantage at times, how much do you think that can help you in terms of, okay, I've went from one school to another, unless you had a different play caller earlier in your high school career, but you have to essentially learn 3 playbooks in 3 years because you go from one high school to another, and then you'll be going to South Carolina next year. Is that something you've thought about at all in terms of helping you out?
Yeah, it's definitely helped me out. So at Loomis, I had an offense coordinator my first year, and then I had a different offense coordinator my second year. And then at here, obviously, it's a different whole playbook. So I've learned 3 playbooks in the past 3 years. But this one's a little different, run the air raid. So we get chucked around a lot, throw it to those guys. So it's been really cool just for me to be able to set protections, set my reads, obviously, and just change plays at the line of scrimmage. Having some freedom up there, and the coaches trusting in me and trusting in the guys that I have to throw to. So it's been awesome just to learn and have all this stuff to go through before I get to college. It's been great.
Does it have any similarity to the offense that you're going to see down here?
Yeah, I think with the freedom that the quarterback has and what Coach Loggins has been talking about and what Spencer, the freedom he has at the line of scrimmage, just being able to get out of stuff and get into stuff that he wants to get to. It's been really good for me just to learn that, obviously at the high school level first, and then obviously in the SEC it's a lot different with the reads you're going to get there too. So it's been awesome.
Big Red wants to know which receivers Dante meshed with the most on his visits to South Carolina. I could take a guess as far as the 2024 class. So I don't know if you want to answer this kind of twofold, where you give an answer to that and then maybe a a player who's already on the roster? I don't know. We'll give you the 2-for-1, Big Red.
Yeah, so I think obviously Mazio is my guy, and I've been on 100 visits with him, and we stay there together. He's been my day one since sophomore year when I committed, and we were talking way before that. And then obviously he broke my heart going to Tennessee for 3 months, not even, and then he came back. So that's my guy. And then obviously the guys I have there: C.J. Adams, Tyshawn, and who's there? Nick also there. Bakari Swain. So all those guys that I helped recruit in the 23 class. And then obviously we're still trying to get some more commits at receiver in the 24 class. So just keeping along those lines. I'll keep that one quiet, see who we try to get there. But
yeah, absolutely. Dante, I got one more question for you, and it's Dowell related. Obviously, he got hired after you were committed. So you've been able to kind of, see him recruit a little bit. How good of a recruiter is he? I know we haven't really heard from him that much about recruiting because he doesn't like to talk about himself. But, yeah, what kind of recruiter is he, and what are you seeing from him?
Yeah, he's very, very, I say this, active in the recruiting world, and he's getting all the lingos down with texting and make sure he's calling the kids and all that stuff. But he's been great, obviously, with the commits first and start with those guys. If he had to, he'd go up and call Dylan Stewart and FaceTime Dylan Stewart if he really wanted to, because he's that type of guy. And he's just a really personable dude, and everybody can relate to him because he's such a player's coach. He puts the players before himself, and I think that's why we have the class we're going to get. And hopefully we're going to drop a couple more commitments in the next couple days, and the next couple weeks of guys. And it all goes down to him and the way he's been recruiting them and the families. So he's a really good recruiter.
Yeah, he dropped a vibe in a press conference, and I'm like, he gets it.
Yeah, exactly. He gets all the lingo.
Yeah.
Well, sure. I'm trying to stay with it. This is what happens the further you get removed from college. As Dante, we're talking about the other day, he sent me something, and I'm just like, what the heck does that even mean? So I'm getting old. I'll ask you this. I'm not going to ask you specific names, and I'm not going to ask you specifically about either a kid that is committed to another school or a kid that is not committed somewhere right now, okay? So we can make it all very vague, all right? The season's going on for you. The season's going on for all these other players out there, guys that are committed to South Carolina, guys that aren't committed to South Carolina. Can you give some game? Because you know how they are. They're itching. They're itching for that next welcome home tweet. I'm assuming you guys are still going very hard at trying to get, again, either guys that aren't committed to South Carolina or guys that are committed elsewhere to make their commitment come signing day to South Carolina. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, very fair. I think I would say a handful of guys, obviously I'm not going to throw any names out there, that are either going to flip and come here or they're going to commit. They're not committed anywhere. So I think it's just, obviously the kids have their senior year. So they're trying to get through that, whether it's with their family that they're trying to deal with or whether it's with their coach and all that stuff. But kids, they also have their senior year and they're trying to play that year and then either commit during the season or commit after the season. And a lot of kids are also playing in the All-American games, stuff like that. So they might do it down there. But I think our class isn't even close to done. I think that obviously it starts with Coach Beamer, and he's been recruiting his butt off. And like we all said at the beginning, we're going to have the best recruiting class in the South Carolina history. So it's still not done yet. I don't even know what day, October something. I don't think we won't sign until January, and then after that. So I think we'll be just fine.
Anything else, Intern Joe?
No, I mean, he covered it. I love the fact that you noticed that Dowell he's trying to catch up a little bit, and that's cool. He seems like a very personable guy, and I think he's the right fit, certainly, for offensive coordinator at South Carolina. A little breath of fresh air, if you will,
yeah.
In terms of how the coordinator has been recently.
Well, Dante, I appreciate you hopping on. It was a last-minute thing, so I appreciate you hopping on right after practice. We will definitely talk to you in the near future.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure, man. Have a good game this week, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you, yes, sir. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
all right.
Dante.
All right.
Dante Reno, once again, Gamecock 2024 commit, hopping on with us. Always a breath of fresh air. But I think the other thing too that he mentioned in there, and I know some people probably go back to like, oh, Dante said it was going to be a big July or June, whatever month it was.
Yep.
Well, as we all saw, there was a lot of things that were interesting towards those commitments. A lot of flips, seemed like, or last-minute changes in the recruiting prediction machine. However, Dante kind of hinted at it. I think we may have hinted at it on the show maybe a week or two ago.
Yep.
Could be flip season very soon. What is
Would
it,
be flip
October
season
3rd?
would be-
October 3rd? Could be a flip coming up very soon. That's all I got to say. So just pay attention
Keep your eyes open.
to
Certainly.
Gamecock Central. We'll keep you posted with that. Intern Joe, we're going to get you out of here in a minute. So just in case
Yep.
you have to get going, and the reason why Joe has to get going, and I'll bring it up because,
No.
Intern Joe told me maybe a week or two ago, maybe a week ago, that after these shows on GC Live, he's been doing another show. He's been doing stand-up comedy. How about that? You know what? That takes that takes some cojones, my man.
Yeah. I'm not going to advertise where. I mean, you guys are just going to have to find it.
We'll go. We'll heckle you. It'll be great. No, we'd go.
Yeah.
I want people to go and show you some.
My jokes aren't the most PG in the world.
I got you.
Yeah, I have started going to open mics and stuff like that because I was tired of my friends telling me I was funny and I didn't have anything to back it up. So yeah, I I have been doing a couple open mics, but awesome. Yeah, we got some time, Mike. We'll get through some of these comments and then get on the road for sure.
If you gotta get going, Joe, you do that. Okay, Carolina would say, yeah. We got Jerry Seinfeld over here.
Yeah, something like that.
No, that's awesome, though. And I give you a lot of credit because not a lot of people have probably the guts to do something like that.
Appreciate it, RL. Yeah, I mean, it's just something to get out of the comfort zone a little bit, a little fun, get up on stage. It helps with this as well, right? Yeah. Being in front of the lights and being live and that kind of thing. So, anything.
You have a live audience. You have a live audience.
Yeah, the lingo and that kind of thing. And
that's neat.
Absolutely. So it's a lot of fun.
Let's get into some of these questions. Big Red. What are we lacking on defense that prohibits us from stopping the run consistently? I think, and I'm going to be a broken record for a lot of this, and I know people don't want to hear it, but I think it first starts with the fact that they just don't have the depth. They really don't have the depth. They don't have the bodies to be able to do it consistently. Now, it's real easy to point to be like, all right, well, Tonka Hemingway's there. You also have Boogie Huntley, and I'm specifically talking about the defensive tackles. Then we can go and branch out to other positions. But I bring that up because you lose a guy the other night like TJ Sanders, who played out of his friggin' mind a couple weeks ago against Georgia. Okay? He goes down. And it's just this – we're having this – the only thing that's been consistent with South Carolina's defense is that they're consistently getting injured. And I know people don't want to hear that because some, I'm not saying everybody, some want to be able to just blame something just so they can figure out, okay, what is it? I'm telling you right now, if Robertson wasn't here at defensive line as the defensive line coach and Jimmy Lindsey was still here and it was the same exact issues, right? Same exact issues they were having. A lot of people would be blaming Jimmy Lindsey right now. Okay? That's just how it goes. Where I get it that people want to just point to different scapegoats, but the reality is this team is friggin' young. We knew that going into the season. How many times did Shane Beamer say it heading into the first game that the lack of depth? I think there was actually 13 true freshmen. Might have been 12 because Marquis didn't travel that week, but he was on the travel. He was supposed to travel is what I'm trying to get at. They sent 12 true freshmen to Charlotte on the dress list for week one. Not saying it doesn't happen at other places, but I just feel like you don't see that often in the SEC. You certainly don't see it often at South Carolina. So I bring that up because that's the biggest issue for them is that their depth already, they're so thin. And when you pile up these injuries, and certainly there's been some players that have come on and have played phenomenal, right? Jalen Kilgore, I can't say enough good things about this young man. Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, may have been Wes. I can't remember which one. I'll give them both credit. They were all over it in preseason. Saying keep an eye on this young man. Now, granted, the circumstances which led him to getting in there week one because Nick went down early with a hamstring injury. No one could have foreseen that. But I think they just don't have the bodies right now to consistently be able to do the things that they need to, especially not against a team that can run the football well. You have to stop it, right? So I'm sitting here and I'm explaining why I think they're not having that success. But at the same time, too, just being able to go up and just make a freaking tackle, be able to take a good angle, finish tackles, the little things that they were doing last week against Mississippi State. Certainly Tennessee, another team, another level. But
for me, it's just consistency at all levels, right? You need your defensive line and your linebackers to play well in the same game, right? Because we've seen both. We've seen the linebackers play well and then clog up the holes that the defensive line leaves. And, it's the same way. It goes the opposite way. I don't think we've seen a cohesive, game from both the defensive line and the linebackers. I mean, maybe Mississippi State, they did a great job with that, but I mean, you need them both to be on the same page. And with all of the revolving doors that is the linebacker position, you expected to have Mokaba, an unbelievable kid.
Well, that hurts too, Joe.
Yes,
you brought it up. So we've
So-
talked about it before, Stone Blandon, and I've brought up his name a couple times because I do think Stone's going to have a very nice career here at South Carolina. I mean, how many times have we talked about an individual? And I'll bring up Xavier Legette. Think how many people, different position, of course. Think how many people were throwing Xavier Legette under the bus last year, early on in the season. It may have been after the South Carolina State game or the Charlotte game, where we had the two drops led to interceptions. How quickly have people who were throwing him under the bus then? How quickly have you seen a complete 180? And now they're probably the first people cheering for Xavier each week with the season that he's had. So I say that because, look, there's going to be players across the country, whether they're freshmen, whether they're sophomores, that come on quickly and they're able to continue to have that success, right? We see it every year across the country. South Carolina has been able to produce players like that. Yeah. The frustrating part is when you're playing as many freshmen, when you're playing as many sophomores, even though Nick Eamon-Worry and DQ Smith have experience, they're still only sophomores. So when you take that into consideration and you don't have the depth behind a lot of these other positions when they don't have much experience, right? Because, again, one season, on field, they have one season, but they're still, from a mental standpoint, they're still just sophomores. They have to take on, and they, look, they've been doing the best they can, but with Eamon-Worry getting injured week 1, if you're going to tell me that didn't screw with his psyche a little bit, I mean, come on. A young kid coming off an All-American season as a freshman, and he has to miss time? You don't think that's screwing with his head a little bit? Or that screwed with his head a little bit? And obviously he's trying to come back and try to be the Nick of old. And I'm not saying he's been having a bad season, but these are just things I'm pointing towards. To point to the pitcher, the ultimate pitcher, which is this Gamecock team is young. And the growing pains that we're seeing this season, it shouldn't surprise anybody. Like, that's the thing about it. Like, if we were sitting here and let's say Spencer Rattler, even under all the pressure that he's been under this year, let's say he couldn't protect the football. Let's say he was just doing stupid things with the football, okay? Consistently, all right? Like, let's say he goes out there and he has, 9 interceptions at this point, almost averaging two a game. That would be an issue. That would be a big issue. That's not to say that the lack of protection up front, that's not to say the inability to stop the run when they need to is something that you should just look at and be like, oh, everything's fine. No. We had feelings that these were going to be issues this year.
Yep.
We had feelings they were going to be an issue. And when you keep adding up the injuries they've had on both sides of the line, this is what you get, especially when you go up against a team that's better than what we saw against Mississippi State. Florida's going to be coming in here in a week. The question now becomes, other than which Florida team's going to show up, is which South Carolina team's going to show up. Because, like we've said, despite all of this, when they are clicking, they have the ability to play with anybody. They showed that in the first half against Georgia. They showed that in the first half against Georgia. So this bye week, getting healthy, and I know people are sick and tired because it probably is something that it feels like, and I've been covering the team since 2016, feels like injuries is, I don't know what it is with the water in South Carolina. Feels like at some point, though, they always deal with injuries. Always. I just think it's a recipe for disaster when you're a young team and you've been as plagued by as many injuries as we've seen so far with South Carolina, especially on the defensive side and offensive line.
Yeah, Big Red asked a follow-up question. Mike, just are you saying that our biggest defensive issues will be our biggest strengths in the long run? Yes. I feel like that's exactly what we're saying. This team is going to build, and their issues defensively, it's something that it's going to be week to week, especially with Blanton.
You just read that, right? I'm gonna set you up, and you answer this for me. All right? What are two of the biggest issues right now with South Carolina?
The run game.
From positional standpoint, you'd say.
Oh, yeah, defensive line and linebacker.
Okay, we can throw a linebacker in there too. I was going to say O-line. I think you would agree.
O-line, yeah. Just the line of scrimmage in general. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
We can throw all three of those in there. But O-line and D-line, okay. Where over the last 2 years, 2023 class and this upcoming 2024 class, where has South Carolina really prioritized heavily on recruiting? Where have they?
The offensive line and the defensive line. I mean, you got the great wall of Carolina coming in, right? We asked Dante about it. He gave a really good answer, and he alluded to it. Mike, you beat me to the question because he mentioned Tree and Tro both having really, really, good years so far and how that excites him because those two guys are just – and Marquis as well. Unfortunately, he's out for the year hurt-wise, but Marquis Anderson's going to be another big piece. But they got the great wall of Carolina coming in, and obviously Dante is really, really excited about it, and everyone else should be too. But going to Robert Doug Hill, Robert asks, are you guys worried about the defense coaching? I'll take this real quick, and then Mike, I'm sure you've got some thoughts on this. Personally, not yet. Clayton White has done a lot in his 2.5 years at South Carolina, and we've seen his scheme get better and better as the year progresses in years past. And so I think, if you get the depth issues, it's so hard because you're repping with so many different guys in the scheme. You can't. I mean, as a player, you don't know who's going to be next to you necessarily. And so that's really hard to get comfortable in that system and execute when you don't necessarily know who's going to be playing next to you. And it's really hard to have so many guys interchangeably to get your scheme down and rep it out. Like this scheme is meant, like these guys are learning as the year goes on. I mean, even if they did just have like the same, core of starting guys, like this scheme is meant to get better and better as the year goes on. So when you have, a rotating glass door of guys coming in and out of this defense, it makes it really, really hard to build on it week after week and that kind of thing. So am I worried about the defensive coaching? Not yet, just simply because of the amount of injuries and that kind of thing. If it gets to a point where we get later on in the year and we haven't really seen a change, then yes, I would start to be concerned. But so far, I mean, in Clayton White's tenure, and I'm assuming this is what you're alluding to a little bit, Robert, I mean, we've seen the progression out of this defense. His defenses have progressively gotten better as the year goes on. So I'm not worried about it just yet.
This South Carolina defense was in really, really bad shape before Beamer and Clayton White got here. And I don't say that to say that everything is all sunshine and rainbows with it, because when you're talking about progressing versus regressing, certainly it's regressed in a lot of areas. Having said that, and talking about the things that we talked about right before we got into this topic, how much of that has to do with coaching and how much of that has to do with the cards that you've been dealt with? I would say it's 50-50, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to put coaching aside whatsoever. That's why, again, this bye week, having this extra time, should hopefully help this Gamecock coaching staff, as well as obviously the players, be able to get acclimated to certain things that they need to be able to take a step back. But it should help this coaching staff address some of those issues, because certainly you can see where the weaknesses are in the defense week in and week out. But when we sit here and we talked about it, when you're young, you don't have depth, you continue to get banged up in areas that you're already thin at, there's only so much that you can do. Losing Mo Kaba early on certainly made this linebacking core that much younger, that much thinner, forcing guys like Stone Bland to play probably more than he should, forcing guys like Debo Williams to have to play, as we saw earlier in the year, and we'll probably see it again throughout the course of the season, playing nearly every play, if not every snap on defense. Pup Howard, right? We use him when we're talking about linebackers. As the season goes on, we've started to see that he'll begin to play more. And I do feel like when we talk about linebackers, we're talking about the defensive line, we talk about the young talent that South Carolina has been able to accumulate over the last couple seasons. I think we're going to start to see more of it. And the reason being is for two reasons. One, they don't have a choice. They really don't. Especially if things aren't working or aren't going well. You can't just keep going out there with 3 good tires if there's 1 bum tire, right? At some point, you have to get that tire fixed, or else you're going to get the same crap over and over and over again. So I think with this South Carolina team, they realize there's certain things that are out of their control right now, right? And people want to be like, well, they should have done this better. They should have done this. What we got to go hit the recruiting trail better. We got to the transfer portal, NIL, right? It's just like you can't do that right now.
Yep.
This isn't friggin' a video game. This isn't the NFL. There's no free agency. You have what you have. You have to make it work. And if you don't, then we can talk about certain things. You want to talk about coaching positions? You can do that, certainly, because there has to be progress made from a big picture, from a team standpoint, but you want to see progress made in positional groups, offense, defense. I think unless things really, really, really go south for South Carolina down the stretch, I think Clayton's going to be here next year. And the reason why I say that is there's a lot of things that Clayton brings to the table that I don't think people truly understand and value. I mean, he's a guy that will be a head coach in the near future. There's no question about that. But now the question now becomes with these younger players, again, when you're banged up, you have to figure things out as a defensive coordinator, right? You have to find a way to be able to make some of these adjustments. And I think Clayton is more than capable of doing that. But they have to be able to do it because, as we mentioned before, when you look at that schedule that's coming up, it's a gauntlet. And I think the unfortunate reality is if South Carolina, God forbid, they went down the stretch and they played just like absolute crap, I'm not necessarily worried about – I'm more so worried about, the people that sit in the chairs, the boosters, all those people complaining that they need to be able to make a change. That's what would lead to, I think, White not being back. But I think he'll be back next season. And so like you said, I think there's a lot of good things that Clayton has done in the first couple seasons here. Again, it's a perfect storm of just the fact that you're young, you've been banged up on defense, and they have not been able to figure out the right pieces to consistently fill that hole, right? You have a leak right now. They need to be able to find a way. I mean, just putting a frigging little Band-Aid on it isn't going to do the job. You got to figure something out over this bye week to be able to get things going. And they certainly have the talent on paper to do it. The big question is, even the inexperienced guys, are they ready to take that next step? I think people keep mentioning Pup Howard. I think we will see more Pup Howard. I think Pup's going to see more playing time. The reason being, again, they have to. They don't have a choice right now. They have to get some of those guys out there, and hopefully they're coming along at that rate where you feel comfortable. And even if they're not, you got to ask yourself, man, is this better than what we've been doing? Because that could be a possibility as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Those last two questions kind of went hand in hand. So it was a good – and Clayton White, that's been the discussion. I see it all over Twitter. And, the fire Clayton Whites and all that. Pump the brakes. It's not yet. Not yet. I think there has to be, a lot more regression for that to even be a question. But, Mike, do you feel our offensive and defensive schemes match our talent? It's a good question.
I think the offensive scheme does. And I feel like what Dal Loggins has done, and I know it's tough to say this after what we saw the other day against Tennessee, we've seen Dal kind of like a chameleon, kind of like adjusting, right, and changing colors a little bit from game to game based on what their weaknesses have been, right? We saw that after week 1 against North Carolina. He gave up 9 sacks. What did USC do? Well, obviously they made some changes on the offensive line, but they kept Takarion Joyner in there to be able to give him more of a pass protection, especially knowing that Mario wasn't there yet because Mario was still coming along, and obviously they play that out perfectly because Mario's looking like an absolute beast right now. But they had to do something to be able to get the pass game going. That's why we saw a lot of the short passes. That's why we saw a lot of the underneath passes. So I think based on what Dow Loggins has done, especially in comparison to where this offense was the last 2 years outside of the Tennessee game from last year, they've been able to do things that are probably better than what the situation would have been in if this was, if Satterfield was calling the offense with what the pieces they have. You have to be able to adjust on the fly with what you got. Now, granted, having said all that, you're heading into this bye week. Hopefully, you're going to be able to take that game to the next level now, right? We're able to figure out, okay, this is what we've been doing. Again, trying to fill that patch like we were talking about from a defensive standpoint. They've had to fill the patch on an offensive standpoint, with just trying to do a couple things to be able to get the offense going. But now, how do you take it to that next level? All right, Juice Wells, well, he's not here right now. Okay, what can we do to make up for that? We got Xavier Leggett, but who can we put on the backside of that? Who can we help to help Xavier, to help Spencer, and all these guys, right? So I think those are the questions that obviously you ask yourself week in and week out on the coaching staff when you have your meeting each week as a staff. But when you're able to take that step back during the bye week, you're really able to focus more on yourself, especially the beginning half of the week before you turn your attention to the next opponent, which, of course, will be Florida.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I think offensively more so defensively. I think it's just harder defensively right now. And I don't know, Mike, like, correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be way off here, but to completely change up a defensive scheme midway through the year, obviously if you change playbooks in the middle of the year, that's hard. But to make a tweak offensively versus changing things up based on what you've been repping out all summer and just your entire defensive philosophy, it seems a lot harder to do defensively, to just change things up, your entire philosophy mid-year.
What you do is, and I think unfortunately it's not as simple as saying like this has been the main issue for South Carolina.
Yeah.
What you do is you start to simplify what you're doing from a defensive standpoint. Maybe you're not blitzing as much. Maybe the coverages, they're not as crazy in terms of, okay, you got a cloud coverage. And what that basically means is, you're running cover 2 on one side. It's like basically cover 6. So you got cover 2 on one side, cover 3 on the other side. So you're not doing things that are as I know that sounds simple, but you're trying to simplify things, maybe, if your guys are getting beat from a man-to-man standpoint, or you feel like your guys are taking poor angles when it comes to the coverages, right? And just their angles in pursuit, maybe you change it up and you play some zone more, maybe. So I think these are the things that South Carolina, they're trying to figure out, just like, like we're sitting here, we're talking about what USC could do. They don't have the luxury. I mean, OD Fortune, he's been playing well. Of course, he's been banged up a little bit. You don't have the luxury of having a Cam Smith right now, right? Who's able to kind of play wherever you need him to do. I think Marcellus Style, he's been able to do some good things, but it's the consistency factor. And although South Carolina has some good pass rush, I'm all over the place right now. Pass rush the other game against Mississippi State, they haven't been very consistent with it all season. So when you're not having a strong pass rush, it's not going to be able to help out your secondary. So, I mean, all these things go hand in hand with each other. Linebacker play, it's not just about stopping the run. It's being able to defend the pass, especially those crossing routes across the middle, or being able to fly out there to the flats, using that speed. These are the things that you have to ask yourself in the bye week. Okay, what can we do to put our guys in a better position to succeed based on, again, what we have to work with? Because maybe, yes, I want to go run this type of scheme from a defensive standpoint. And it's not like you're going to overhaul everything. You're going to kind of streamline it. You're going to make it a little bit more simple. I know.
One more question.
We'll got one more because I know Joe's got to get ready to hit the stage, and then we'll hit our ads and we'll call it night.
Absolutely. So, Big Red, are we as fans expecting too much out of our defense with lots of underclassmen out there? I mean, it's tough. It's obviously you shouldn't expect a whole lot when you have upperclassmen or underclassmen out there. But I mean, for me to gauge this in terms of say that you're expecting too much or too little, I don't think South Carolina is too far off necessarily. I mean, I think from what I'm seeing, the expectations are relatively realistic, but I wouldn't say you're expecting too much or too little. I don't know, Mike. Tricky question for me, at least.
I think it's one of those things where you want to at least be able to see progress made from week in to week out, right? Like, obviously, the competition, it changes things a little bit. It's not like you're going from, Mississippi State to Charlotte the next week, right? You went up against a good Tennessee offense, but you want to be able to see whether it be offense, whether it be even, whether it be defense or even South Carolina's offense, regardless of the side of the ball, even special teams we can throw in there. You want to see some type of progress made. So specifically talking about the defense, we sit here and we talk about the same issues, it feels like, every friggin' week outside of what they did against Furman and outside of what they did against Mississippi State. You want to see them do a better job of stopping the run. You want to see the defensive backs do a better job of being able to not just be in coverage and finish plays, but to me, one thing that stood out, and it's not saying that's happening every play, but it feels like it's happening more often than it should, just the pursue angles. Being able to take a good angle and a pass that maybe goes for 2-3 yards, even 4 yards sometimes. Being able to make the open field tackle instead of missing it and it bounces off for another 10 yards. Just these little things. So from an expectation standpoint, and I know Joe loves when I always make a 85 Bears reference. No, they're not going to look like the 85 Bears. No one's asking them to look like the 85 Bears. But I don't think it's too much, even with the fact that, again, like we've talked about, the lack of depth, the injuries that have been piling up, the inexperience they have on defense. I don't think it's too much to ask to see progressions from this defense each week in some capacity. In some capacity. Again, going up against a good Tennessee team last week. They do good things on both sides of the football. But that doesn't mean, okay, game's over. Let's not even show up. No. You have to be able to go out there and find ways to show that you're making improvements in those areas that we talked about. And that's been an issue for South Carolina. All right, Intern Joe, let's hit those ads before you got to go take the stage.
Absolutely. I'm excited. So first off, we got our sponsor, Liberty Tax. Tax ID is an uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call in the tax team at Liberty Tax. They are fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be owing Uncle Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood, open 9 to 9 on weekdays and 9 to 5 on Saturdays with multiple service options. Start through the Liberty Tax mobile app or through their desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. Give a call to upload your tax documents. And when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. Give them a call at 803-462-5576. Once again, on your screen, 803-462-5576 for all of your tax needs.
Today's show is brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond, who has been a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central as well as every one of these GC Live shows. Give them a call over at the Movement Mortgage if you're trying to find the best rate, right? And as you know right now, it's not too easy to buy the home with a great rate if you're in the process of trying to purchase a home. He can do what he did for our very own Wes Mitchell as well as former Gamecock quarterback Perry Orth, and he can help you get that best rate. He can help make that process much easier for you. Try to limit those headaches. Give Clint a call at 803-771-6933. Well, we appreciate everyone that tuned in tonight. Didn't get to everyone's questions, but we apologize for that. But we appreciate everyone that sent in questions tonight and comments as well. We'll be back at it again at next Tuesday, but be sure to catch Wes and Chris. They'll be at it again for GC Live tomorrow at 2, and then I'll be on Thursday at 2 for the GC Live afternoon drive. Just a reminder, coordinators will not speak tomorrow since South Carolina is off this week, just like Shane Beamer and the players didn't speak today. But just to give people a reminder in case they are curious. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike Yu. Appreciate everyone that tuned in. Head on over to the Gamecock Central YouTube page if you want to watch this show in its entirety, or head on over to the Gamecock Central Podcast Network where you can listen to the show and all of the other GC shows as well. Have yourself a good Tuesday night and enjoy the rest of the week and enjoy the bye week.